Good afternoon. I'm Brandy Smith, live in the KHU 11 newsroom. We want to join a press conference in progress. This is the Texas House Republican Caucus.
That benefits our teachers, that works for our foster kids, excuse me, that benefits our seniors, takes care of our families, and all Texans who want a Texas solution to the drug trafficking and human smuggling that occurs along our border. They've done all this while gallivanting across our nation's capital, making appearances on TV, raising money, and enjoying a 3-week vacation while we Republicans are here, along with the citizens of Texans, awaiting their return. And we do absolutely hope for that. Their actions show a lack of respect for their constituents who elected them. We denounce that decision to flee the state and to avoid voting on critical legislation that Texans desperately need and care about. I ask the Texas taxpayers, is this what you expect from your elected representatives? I'd be happy to yield for a few questions before we wrap up.
Mr. Chairman, can you elaborate a little bit on the call of the House and what basically is the procedure? I assume GPS and maybe the Rangers, or does their jurisdiction extend only to Texas? Or
Yes, Dave. The only ability they have is within the state, and we hope that all those legislators not here will, by their own will, choose to come back and do the work. That's what we're elected to do. So that was the oath we swore to. Those are the rules we adopted, and we think their better angels will prevail, and we'll see them here. We think things have been delayed, not denied.
What role do Republicans have as far as trying to strike a compromise on the election bill in order to get Democrats not only to come back but to stay?
Yeah, Christian, I think we've already compromised on the bill. That bill's been negotiated. We had a great bill last session. It's been improved by the Democrats' own admission. They were on the committee that heard the bill. Many of the people were here, spent 24 hours working on that bill over the weekend. Those bills can be amended on the House floor. It is their legislation. It's theirs to shape, it's theirs to work on, and we await their presence.
Mr. Chairman, what about the stalemate here that we could see? You know, Democrats, they've essentially told us they have no immediate plans to come back. The governor could keep calling special sessions over and over. How long could this draw out in theory?
January of 23 is the short, snappy answer to that. But I really think when they look at their constituents and see that they need tax relief, they need funding for schools, they need CPS addressed, our teachers need to be paid, that they're going to want to come back and do the work they were elected to do. I really think that's just a matter of time. It may be days, it may be weeks, it may be months. It's the governor's decision whether or not we return for more special sessions. But I think that's very much his desire and our desire to do the work that we were elected to do.
What happens if Democrats hold out for weeks, months, and we continue to have this group here in the chamber? What are your plans? I mean, what is this body prepared to do?
Well, I think we're spending a lot of money to be here, and I think at some point the people of Texas are going to say, what are we paying for to get nothing? And I think they will have to rise up and speak for themselves. We're delivering a message. We want our colleagues back. We respect their work. We respect their opinions. We want to embrace them and work with them, but we have work to do. But I'm hoping the people of Texas will now take that message to them, because that's for whom they're working.
What's your message to them, especially the reps who say they are working up in D.C. right now?
Well, I mean, I don't know what they're working on, because the work of the Texas House occurs in the Texas House, in the committee rooms, as we work on bills. There's no work going on there for the Texas House. They need to be here. That's why we measure quorum every day when we register.
And what's the mood in there? Is it frustrating? I mean, if you're saying they're not working up there, they've kind of halted work here. What's going on inside for the past 4.5 hours?
Well, I mean, we would certainly like to see them here, but it's not the first time this legislature's moved a little more slowly than some of us would recommend, right? And so this is just par for the course. We've all had some pretty tough days. We've had some pretty long days, days that became multiple days on the floor. So we're up to the challenge. That's not a big deal. We want them to come back. That's our message.
Last question. One more.
are there things you can be working on during this, or are you just going to have to stand in place?
Our committees are unable to help our teachers. They're unable to consider tax relief. They're unable to handle the crisis at the border. We are at a standstill, ready to work, Dave, but at a standstill. Thank you very much. To the challenge. That's not
Good. You just heard there from Representative Jim Murphy. He's the chairman of the Texas House Republican Caucus, responding to those more than 50 Democrats who left the state of Texas yesterday, boarded 2 charter planes for Washington, D.C., and now say in a press conference this morning that they plan to stay there as long as they need to through this special session. And you just heard it from Representative Murphy there. This could extend to January 2023. Governor Abbott can keep calling special sessions, and Democrats can keep holding out. There have been a couple of developments since the press conference earlier today, and I want to run down some of that. So just for some background, where we stand now, those Democrats are in Washington, D.C. They say they're doing so because they don't want to be a part of passing legislation regarding voting rights in Texas. They are pushing Congress to pass H.R. 1, the voting rights bill, and they say they are buying time for Congress to do so, something like 3 weeks. Now, Representative Murphy touched on that. He says they are gallivanting on a 3-week vacation. He called it a lack of respect for constituents for them to walk away from the special session in the way they did. He hopes that they will return by their own will, and he calls the voting rights legislation and the other legislation that lawmakers are working on theirs to shape and work in. He says the remaining Republicans there are up for the challenge. This is something that the legislature has dealt with in the past. You know, in May of this year, we saw Democrats walk out of the end of the regular session. But back in 1979 and then again in 2003, you had Democrats walking away in 1993, going to Oklahoma to avoid being part, both of those times, election and voting related issues. Earlier this afternoon, the remaining members of the Texas House voted 76-4 to have the Sergeant at Arms send for Democrats. This is mostly procedural because Texas Rangers can't travel out of state to arrest those lawmakers. That is why in 2003, the state reps went to Oklahoma. When they get back, they can be arrested if they don't go willingly. But I want to give an example of what this looks like, how this plays out practically. Houston Representative Sean Theory is in D.C. right now, but here's what happened in her office earlier today.
Okay, thank you. If you're here for no, would you please let them know we need them on the floor and call the sergeant's office and ask for me if they have any questions.
And ask for you?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was your name again?
Anthony Duster, I'm the doorkeeper with the call sergeant.
Shall do.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a DPS trooper entering Representative Theory's office at the Capitol, requesting her presence and notifying her staff that once she does return, she is expected to go to chambers. We've talked a lot about the Republicans. You just heard from them. We also want to share what the Democrats said this morning as they held a press conference on the steps of the U.S. Capitol.
More than 50 Democratic members of the Texas House have left Texas to stop Republicans from passing the latest iteration of their voter suppression legislation.
We, as Democrats, we were united. We said we are going to kill any undemocratic efforts in the state legislature. And if that meant leaving the state, we were going to do it. And we're not doing this for Democrats. We're doing this for Republicans. We're doing this for independents. We're doing this for North Texans and South Texans and East and West Texans. We're doing this for Catholics and Protestants. Anybody in the state of Texas who needs to exercise the right to vote should do so freely. And we are not going to buckle to the big lie in the state of Texas. The big lie that has resulted in anti-democratic legislation throughout the United States. We said no when the big lie came to the Capitol in Texas and darkened our door. We said no during the regular session, and we are saying no during the regular session. We are happy to work on bipartisan proposals that expand the right to vote, that make it easier to vote and harder to cheat in the state of Texas. But that is not what we saw even at the outset of this process, when none of the amendments offered by my colleagues were considered in committee. So we said, and we took the very difficult decision. We are not here smiling. We are not spiking the ball. We are not saying that we are happy. In fact, we are sad for democracy in the state of Texas. And we took a solemn oath to protect the Constitution of the United States and to protect the Constitution of the state of Texas. And that is why we stand united before you here today in preserving not only the democracy in Texas, but the democracy of the United States.
We can't stay here indefinitely to run out the clock, to stop Republican anti-voter bills. That's why we need Congress to act now and pass the For the People Act. Texas Democrats will use everything in our power to fight back, but we need Congress to act now.
I want to be 100% clear. Now, not later, not sometime in the future, now. We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Yes.
It needs to be signed into law, and we also need to pass H.R. 1. Our citizens can't wait any longer.
Congressman Mark Vesey, and he was joined by Congressman Lloyd Doggett. That's significant because Doggett was one of those 12 Texas senators who back in 1979 fled the Capitol to avoid voting on election-related bills. Of course, we're seeing that play out again today. The issues that we're talking about are Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 3. Democrats call it restrictive. Republicans say it's common sense and strengthening voting laws in Texas. It does rein in local initiatives, drive-through voting, 24-hour voting, tightens vote by mail rules, and also allows for more access for poll watchers. The reason this is significant, the more than 50 Democrats, is because for the House to pass any legislation, to get any business done, it needs a quorum. That's 2/3 of 150 members. So when more than 50 vacate the state or even the chamber on a given day, the chamber doesn't have the quorum needed to get that business done. It's a waiting game right now, kind of a game of chicken between House Republicans and House Democrats to see how we move forward. Of course, we will keep you posted here at KHOU 11, coming up on the 411 at 4 o'clock, and always on KHOU.com, as well as our KHOU 11 news app.